Hi everyone, I'm Toby Poston from the British Vehicle Rental and Leasing Association. I'm going to talk to you today about how connected cars and vehicle data is really starting to have an effect on our sector. So when I talk about our sector, I'm broadly talking about the fleet sector. So in the UK, we represent car clubs, people like Drive Now, Car2Go, Zipcar. We represent the car rental companies, so Hertz, Avis Enterprise, and then there's hundreds of smaller and medium-sized rental companies, and then all the big leasing companies as well that provide personal leasing and company car leasing to hundreds and thousands of customers across the UK. So we own and operate, our members own and operate around 5 million cars, vans and trucks, and are responsible for nearly half of all vehicles sold in the UK each year. So if you like, we've got a lot of skin in the game in terms of the future of connected cars, the future of maintaining access to that data. So a lot of people, when you first talk about what you do, you represent leasing companies, they say, oh, so you're just the middleman that basically sits in between the car manufacturer and the customer, which annoys all our members because basically we do a lot more than that. We're not just a middleman. Whether it's providing advice and support to people on choosing the right vehicles for the right job, whether it's helping people to aggregate services and make sure that they help them sort of deal with the hassly bits of vehicle ownership, whether it's dealing with maintenance and repairs, breakdowns, tyres and windscreens. Huge amount of effort goes into really smoothing that out and taking that hassle away from members. And then increasingly we're helping members, helping customers to embrace all the potential that comes with new forms of mobility. So whether that's, creating a sort of a dashboard of their cost of ownership for their fleet, helping them sort of look at different ways of getting their staff moving around. It's a massive piece of work that's going on there as well. And the thing really that ties all this together, the thing that you need to be able to do all these things efficiently is, of course, data. And it's not the thing that I think is really driving a lot of change in the industry at the moment, that is really pulling people out of their comfort zones, is that we're not just dealing with one sort of major change. We're not just dealing with one way in which the industry is reinventing itself. It's being reinvented in 3 different areas. So you've really got to have eyes in the back of your head, because across all 3 of these areas, things are changing at a humongous pace. In terms of the wider context, obviously governments are very interested in this whole area of intelligent mobility and these changes, because they see a huge potential for this new generation of mobility, electric mobility, to really deal with a lot of the social issues that they've got in cities, whether it's congestion, whether it's road safety. They really particularly want this technology to change cities and get people out of using their cars and to using more sort of sustainable modes of transport. This picture, I think, it really sums up the sort of situation we're in at the moment. Whereas if you look at the DeLorean in the front, that's I suppose the value offered by this new move to connected, electric and sort of shared usership. And in the background, you've got all these companies that are sort of chasing this sort of humongous cash pile they think they can earn from these new business models. And the thing you notice from that picture is that there's no sheriff. There's no US cavalry sort of riding in. And that's, I think, sums up the situation at the moment, because there is no sort of regulatory or sort of established business practice that sort of helps people negotiate this new world. So unfortunately at the moment, I think it could end up with a few people getting hurt or even scalped, because basically there's a very sort of Wild West scenario going on. I'm now going to look at some of the sort of where this competition is happening around data. And one of the key ones that our members particularly involved is around some of these business models. So whereas, 10, 15 years ago, you maybe had 2 or 3 business models, it was your standard vehicle rental, it was leasing, car clubs were beginning to emerge, and you had public transport. Now you've got a whole host of different ways of accessing mobility. And individually, all these sort of business models you see on the right hand side there, they are all using data now to sort of push themselves into the market, to gain market share, and data is hugely valuable to them. And of course, then what you've got coming in is you've got all these other new companies coming in, technology companies, OEMs, travel management companies, who then think, actually, if I can own that customer relationship, if I can aggregate all those different types of mobility onto my platform, I can be the boss. I might not build these machines, I might not run these fleets, but I can control the customer. I can be the person making that tiny bit of incremental income on every single transaction. Big stakes there to play for. One of the interesting issues I was going to ask the earlier panel is around this whole area of mobility as a service that's going to tie all these things together. I think there's still a big role to be defined for whether that is a competitive environment where the likes of Google or Uber or Citymapper come in and just, make hay in a certain city, or whether actually we should be looking for Transport for London to maybe do an Oyster Mark II, and they should be setting the rules for this mobility platform, and they should be giving out franchises, deciding what the rules are. Because if you think about cities where congestion and safety is such a problem, should we really be leaving it out open to the open market? These companies that are at the behest of venture capitalists back in San Francisco or shareholders who don't really, at the end of the day, give a monkeys about whether it's safe and clean to drive in London. They're focused on money. Should there be a bit more regulation, a bit more local authority control over these platforms? So I'll just leave that out there. Other area where there's a huge amount of competition is in the car itself. If you think about how much time we spend sitting in a car each year, that is a prime piece of digital real estate, is that dashboard in that car. And at the moment, the manufacturers have the main bit of control of that, but we see people like Google, Apple, trying to get more real estate in that car by offering their sort of in-car apps. And this is a fascinating area to watch in terms of how this is going to develop. Is this going to be still dominated by OEMs in the future, or are you going to get to a scenario where the likes of Nokia and Motorola suffer from, over the last 10 years, where actually the likes of Apple and Google start dominating that space and dominating that customer area? This is about the vehicle manufacturer business model. So in terms of vehicle data and customer data, these are the sort of 4 key areas where they see the value being delivered. It's in attracting new customers from some of the infotainment services and the apps. It's expanding their revenue streams. So again, this is this sort of whole vertical integration piece where they want to not just supply the metal, they want to be ensuring that. They want to be selling data to third parties. They want to be selling you movies or all sorts of things. They want to get greater loyalty from their customers. So again, that dashboard is another opportunity to sort of, you might have the loyalty from customers who like your engine or who like that particular model of car, but we also know that customers feel very loyal to certain operating systems or certain apps they have on their phones. That's another area where customers can really drive loyalty for people who are driving their cars. And then there's a massive one that's often underestimated, which is around reducing costs at the back end. All this data that's coming from cars can give you a huge amount of potential to reduce your warranty claims, to improve the reliability of parts, or even just give you remote updates down the line. So you might buy a 100 horsepower car, and then a year and a half later, you could, as a manufacturer, go and sell them a 50 horsepower update remotely over the air. You could sell them a new dashboard theme. All sorts of opportunities. And manufacturers, we're really glad to see, are willing to sort of share that data. They recognise, as I said, there's a big opportunity to sort of sell some of that data to various third parties. These are just some of the key ones that are obvious, really, in terms of what data they might want to sell. Location of people, hugely valuable for marketing purposes, how those vehicles are being used, where they're going, which might help you sort of decide where to put in the charging points or where you might want to set up your next service station. What's the mileage on that car? How healthy is that car? Can you do predictive maintenance work on it? And then how well is that car being driven? Obviously, insurers really, really after that data. And this is how it works at the moment. So if you think about the modern car, there's sort of 3 broad ways that sort of data is accessed and shared. You've got the smartphone that's taken into the car that gives you, that smartphone could be a sort of mini telematics device in itself. You've got the manufacturer that's got a direct link via the modem in most modern connected cars. It can pull off a whole raft of data. And then we've got access for third parties at the moment via the OBD port. That's where you plug your telematics in. So that is where, at the moment, you can get real-time read-write capability on that car, and it's growing numbers of fleets are taking advantage of that. But this is all set to change because the rules are basically changing, and it's more about now how vehicle manufacturers and third parties are sort of jostling around how can they get access to the data. It's not about who owns it, because there's no real concept of data ownership. It's about who controls it and who accesses it and what are the terms of sharing that data. So the European Commission recognises that this has been an issue. They've known this is an emerging issue for some time, and they've been trying to bring together the various different parties to try and resolve this. They've been talking about it for quite a few years now, and basically those 5 points there is all they've really managed to agree, which is the broad terms of, these are the principles in which we should share data. The data subject, the person in the car driving the car, should give consent if their data is being collected. That data should be held securely and privately. The access to data should not endanger the life of that person driving the car or anyone else around the car. There should be a standardised open platform for accessing the data. And it should be fair and undistorted competition. So, no one should be able to get control of that data and have an unfair advantage. We've also seen some more details emerge recently around the whole issue of GDPR and how the whole change in the way data protection rules are going to apply. What does that mean for different people in that value chain? So the vehicle manufacturers, the SMMT in the UK, recently came out with their view of what this means for the fleet sector, which is our members. And basically, to sum this up, they're basically telling our members that you've got no rights at all to the data. That the only person with any rights, apart from the manufacturer, is the driver. And if you want to access, and if that driver gives you permission to get data from the car, you've got to go to the manufacturer. They will tell you what data you can have, how much you'll pay for it, and what the terms and conditions are. Take it or leave it. So we're not that happy with that, and we're sort of arguing our case on whether that should be the case going forward. So this is their model. A number of manufacturers have sort of come forward with their model of how the data should be accessed in the future. And it's sort of similar to the previous model, apart from one big change. So you've still got the access via the smartphone, you've still got the manufacturer access, but the OBD telematics bit, that in their world is gone. There's no real world while the vehicle's moving. There's no access to that telematics port. You can access it to a certain extent when it's parked up in a garage, but while it's moving, you need to chuck your telematics device away because you will not get access. So basically what they're saying is in the future, they need to be the system administrator for the car. They need to be the organisation that's going to control access. They will have the shop window. And that yellow line, that is where the sort of competition starts in terms of your third party trying to access data, develop products. You basically have to wait till it's gone through the car manufacturer's system, been formatted in their servers, and then you get basically a pricing list that you go and access it there, which we think is a bit unfair. And this is why we think it's unfair. Basically, for a number of reasons. So data latency, there's no real-time access. So basically, any form of delay for a lot of different types of innovation, you might want to use data. Any form of delay, even if it's seconds, bits of seconds, can have a massive impact in terms of the quality of your service you're trying to offer. We believe that under that model, OEMs and part suppliers would get preferential access because they're getting it straight from the vehicle. We believe that the third parties, and by third parties I mean insurers, I mean independent garages, I mean diagnostic equipment manufacturers, would be at a disadvantage in terms of the cost they'd have to pay. And in terms of innovation, because again, if you're going to a manufacturer saying, I want this data, and they're going to ask you, why do you want it? They're going to know what you're developing, what products, what innovations you're bringing up. So again, we think that's unfair. And it's not just us that think there's a danger here. So last year, the European Commission did a survey into this whole data economy bit across all different segments. And this was one of the key points that came out when they looked at 100 real-world companies that are sharing data. Number one motive, vertical integration. And we all know what that means. That means basically you want to use that data to foreclose on the supply chain. So if you just do one thing before, if you can get that data, it gives you an advantage to sort of move down the supply chain and do other bits, or move up the supply chain. You could see that the long-term gain might be that, a vehicle manufacturer might be leasing the car, renting the car, doing all the maintenance, developing a mobility service, car club. That's fine if they want to compete, but having unfair access to data, which gives them that prime mover advantage, is what we're worried about. So this is what we think is the sort of key criteria going forward in terms of developing this sort of fairer ecosystem. It's about basically getting equal access to the data, being able to use your own software on the data, being able to read and write, so do stuff on the internal interface of the car, communicate directly with the driver. If you think of our members, they're the ones leasing that car to a customer. Why can't they directly interact with their customer via the car? It seems pretty straightforward. The driver should be able to choose a third-party place to go and get it repaired, or to get their tyres done, or to get their windscreen replaced. And we shouldn't have our business models monitored by the owners, by the people controlling access to that data. So, moving forward, there's some new relationships required. I think you can probably guess who's who in this picture. And I'm pleased to say that things are moving forward. We are having some very useful discussions with manufacturers. The UK government and the European government are recognising now that there is a lack of legislation and regulation, both in terms of the technical requirements that establish how cars are built, but also in terms of things like data protection and competition law. And we're confident that things are slowly going to change, but at the moment it is that Wild West scenario. So it's be careful out there. Thank you.